What's up, Duke fans, and welcome to another episode of Duke Blues Central. Duke was victorious tonight, walking away with a 77-69 point victory against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons in a game that wasn't pretty, didn't have all the shooting spectacle we expected from two of the better three-point shooting teams in the ACC, but still, even with all that, even with the game being ugly, being kind of a rock fight from a shooting perspective, it is still great to be sitting here talking to you about a Duke victory. And as I always say, ugly wins are better than pretty losses. This was an interesting game to watch. We're heading kind of into the most, what I would say is the most important stretch in Duke's season. Duke's schedule is a pretty killer schedule, finishing out our last, I think it's 7 games now of the regular season. The teams left on the schedule, no particular order. Miami, Wake Forest, again at Wake Forest, home versus North Carolina, at FSU versus Virginia, at NC State, and versus Louisville. What that basically breaks down into in the quad system. Somebody tweeted this at the Duke Nation. Ryan tweeted this before the game, and I reposted it on Twitter right before the game as well, talking about how important this stretch is for the Blue Devils. Right now, Duke's standing, Duke's net rankings are as follows. We're 17th in the net. In quad 1, we are 5 wins, 2 losses. That's pretty good. To have 5 quad 1 wins is nothing to hang your head at. We are 0-2 in quad 2. I believe that would be 1-2 now after tonight. I think Wake was considered a quad 2 opponent tonight, just barely. Quad 3, we're 8-1, and then quad 4, 5-0. I think that one loss in quad 3 is Georgia Tech. Maybe they could make a push to quad 2. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know everything about that system. It's pretty dang complicated. But that's where Duke's rankings stand now. We're projected to be a 3 or a 4 going into the night. The last bracketology had us at a 4 seed. But during the game tonight, they showed Lundardi's updated rankings, and they had Duke as a 3 seed. So right on that 4 and 3 line. But with this many games remaining, we've got 3 quad 1 games remaining, and after tonight, 3 quad 2 games left. So some of these quad 1 games are going to be extremely important. There's a lot of room for Duke to grow. I would have not told you this early in the year, but it really feels like Duke could maybe squeeze their way up into a 2 seed. Like if we're able to take down Miami at Miami, beat Wake at Wake, and then end the year winning at versus North Carolina in Cameron. Gosh, I think there's a world we could be looking at a 2-seeded Duke team going into the tournament. Now, a lot of that depends on what we do in these other games. For instance, if we lose at FSU, even if we win those, I don't think we could get that high. But it'll certainly be interesting. If we finish the year undefeated, I believe we would have the ACC regular season title, finishing with, by then it would be 8 quad 1 wins, 8-2 in quad 1. Pretty dang good. I don't know what that would totally mean for our seeding, but I think there's a world where Duke could really contend for a 3 or 2 seed here as we end the year. So this was an extremely important stretch in the year, and it all started really with this 3-game homestand after the loss to North Carolina. And, we didn't have the prettiest of performances. Beat Notre Dame, beat Boston College, and then the big one was today at Wake. I think this was one a lot of people had circled on their calendars. Wake has been I think they've been an underrated team this year. They've got a better ACC record than their overall record, but they're a team who shoot the ball really well. Just one of those crazy 3-point shooting teams, and Hunter Salas just is an incredible player, and he had an awesome game tonight. Had the best game of anybody on the floor for Wake, and showed why. If you're talking about guys who are going to go pro next year, you could definitely see him being drafted higher, pretty high, maybe in this next this NBA draft. I don't know where he is on mock draft, whether his size projects in the NBA, but man, after what I've seen from him this season, Guys, I think shooting maybe even close to 45% from three, with at 6'5", with all that athleticism he put on display tonight. The guy looks like a pro to me. So he is a great player, and they're well coached. They had some good coaching moments out there today against Duke. Wake is a decent team, and I think we are going to have a hard time beating them on their own floor just coming up. I think it's later this month. We got to go at Wake and try and beat them there. I'm going to go ahead and throw out a prediction that game will just be wildly different than this one. Just the way that both teams shot the ball in this one. Duke picked it up in the second half, but especially Wake, the way they shot the ball in this one, I think definitely is part of the credit belongs to Duke's defense. Duke defended them really well from the three today, which is something I'll talk about here in a minute. But you can see that game just going way, way different at Wake. But anyway, enough talking about the schedule. Let's break down tonight's game. Kind of want to start with the negatives. So I want to end the episode on a positive. Yeah, never good to start with the goods and then it was the bads. I don't want to end on a sour note. So let's start with the bad. And the first thing I just have is just bad shooting, especially in the first half. First half of this game was a spectacle to watch, and you realize that if you watched it. From the first half perspective, both teams shot 21% from three. Wake went 4 for 19. Duke went 3 for 14, which is ironic because the game opened up with a Kyle Filipowski open corner three that he drained, and turned out that was going to be his only made three of the game, even though he shot 5 more after that. Just first half of this game was not pretty offensively. Duke's defense, I thought, did a good job disrupting Wake's good shooting, but I think part of it was we were getting a little lucky because they weren't making shots, but I definitely think the more part of it, like the bigger piece of the pie, was the way that Duke was kind of running Wake off of the line, and when they got open shots, they were able to hit much higher percentage of those than when Duke was running them off the three-point line, and it was clear that was Duke's strategy. I mean, I think that's everybody's strategy for Wake when they play them this year. The thing is, they've just been so good at it that not a lot of teams have been able to be successful at that. But Duke definitely in the first half, and even throughout the entire game, was able to really disrupt Wake's three-point shooters. Wake finished only shooting 23%, made 6 threes out of 26. So Duke defended them well, but I think part of that translated to Duke's side of the ball, where we were not shooting the ball well at all. We finished this game shooting 28% from three. I believe this is 3 games in a row where we end up, I don't know if we ended what our percentages were, but this is 3 games in a row Duke has struggled to shoot the ball from three. And part of that has been on individual guys. And McCain had a better three-point shooting night tonight, but he went 1 for 8 against Boston College, which is not common, especially for him. And a lot of these too are Filipowski missed three-pointers. This all isn't totally like just our guards not being able to shoot. This is part of a symptom of Flip just shooting more threes in his past few games. And he's not going to be as high clip a three-point shooter as McCain, Roach, or even Proctor, even though Proctor wasn't able to hit a shot tonight. But it's just something to keep your eye on, Duke's shooting. I early in the year, in a lot of the shows, I harped on the fact that Duke's three-point shooting needed to be great for us to get where we want to go, which is, to make a run at the Final Four, try to go as deep in the tournament as we can, even though I think somewhat the expectation has been lowered for this team since the offseason that we had with a lot of the guys coming back. But if we're going to make that run, I think a huge part of it is going to be the way that we shoot from the outside. And this is just 3 games in a row where our outside shooting hasn't been all that impressive. Hopefully it's just a bad slump and we can get this negative slump out of the way in February. Maybe late February starts kicking back up, and in March we're just on fire shooting 40% from 3 in the tournament. That would be great. Go ahead and get all the bad shots out now. But that's all I have for that. And I think also another part of that is I tweeted this out in the game. It's so funny how the game of basketball works. It's like these two teams are touted as like these are the 2 best three-point shooting teams in the ACC maybe, and this is going to be a high-scoring shootout game, and turns out the winning score was 77. Wake was held to under 70 points. But of course, the game starts with both teams shooting like 21% from three. I think Wake had to shoot 0 for 12. They started 0 for 12 from three before they hit their first 3-point shot. But it's funny how that translates to the other side of the court, because Duke in turn then was not able to hit a shot. Now, I'm not saying you would think those things really don't have to do with each other. Wake missing threes has nothing to do with Duke missing threes. But I just think the way the game ebb and flows, you just see that more often than not. Like when you're really playing lock-up defense on the perimeter, just feels like you shoot worse. I don't know. Maybe part of that is the guys are so zoned in on defense, especially around the arc, that maybe they're taking little breaks on offense and they lose some focus and they don't shoot as well. But it's just interesting how that works. But hopefully the bad shooting is just a result of a couple game skid. And we've also, other than Carolina, which we didn't shoot the ball well from three there either, and I think that's actually a bigger story of that game than most people think. I think if Duke is average from three that game, I think the numbers would tell you that Duke wins. But besides that, Duke has won these games where they've not been spectacular from three, and this is the most impressive one. I mean, beating a team like Wake, shooting this poorly from three, 28%. Second half, we did shoot 36% from three, which is more in line with our average. Yeah. It just, if you would have told me before the game Duke was going to finish below 30% from three, while still shooting 35 threes, I don't know that I would have told you that Duke's walking away from Cameron with a win. But nevertheless, because of our effort on the defense, our effort on the rebounding, which I thought was impressive tonight, we out-rebounded Wake. Duke's able to end up with a win here, which is really, really impressive. The next bad I want to get to, which I don't love harping on individual performances. You know, I don't know if sometimes it feels weird. These guys are so young and they're so early into the career. It's not like criticizing an NBA player where you're talking about a 30-plus-year-old guy who's played the game for so long, and you're talking about long-form habits that have developed in their game. You're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds primarily when you're talking about Duke players. But it has to be brought up. I mean, Tyrese Proctor had I think an awful game tonight. He felt to me, and I don't know if you guys felt the same way watching this, but he felt to me like a non-factor in this game, even kind of on the defensive side. He had Salas for a large portion of the game, and Salas ended up with 22 points, shooting 10 for 20, 2 for 5 from 3. Just not his typical night. When you got Proctor on a guard, you expect him to really do a lot of damage and lock up that guard. And if nothing else, even if it's not clicking on the offensive side of the ball, which it wasn't tonight, you expect him to really do a number on the other guard he's defending, and that just didn't happen. We've talked about it. I mean, I think 3 consecutive episodes now. Tyrese Proctor's performance. He was aggressive in his three-point shot. He went 0 for 4 from 3, but those shots were aggressive. Some of them weren't great. Some of them were open, and he just didn't convert. It is worth pointing out he did get shaken up late in this game. In the second half, came down hard. Looked to me like he hit his head, but I didn't hear anything on what the injury was. He got up and walked off fine, sat out. I think was it late in the first half? It might have been late in the first half, and sat out the rest of the half, and then came back in the second half. I think it was, yeah. He fell, took a hard fall late in the first half, didn't play the rest of the first half, but there was only like a minute or so left, and then he came out in the second half and played seemingly unbothered. But I guess that's worth pointing out, that injury, but he wasn't having a great game at halftime anyway, even before that. And I think he would tell you that. Tyrese, let me just read his stat line, and you tell me if this is a good stat line for him. Finishes 0 for 5, has 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 turnover, only fouled 1 time, no points for Tyrese Proctor. That's just... that's a stat line you expect from like a Caleb Foster. No disrespect from him, but just a young freshman still feeling out their way in college basketball. This is a big game against a great ACC opponent, a team that I think hopefully will make the tournament, even though I could talk forever about how the NCAA tournament just shafts the ACC every year, and somehow we don't rank in these metrics really well, and yet we have like more Final Fours and champions than any of the league, I think, in 10 years. Like the way that the AC teams produce in the tournament is almost never disappointing, and we still just don't get the respect we deserve. But I hope, to me, Wake Forest is an NCAA tournament team. But you expect in a game like this a young guy, freshman, to make mistakes and kind of have a game where maybe he's not sticking out in your head as a real negative effect. We've talked about it with Caleb in some games. You know, he's at times been where, okay, he's not really hurting you that much, but he's also not helping you that much. You expect that from a young guy like him. With Proctor, it's becoming harder and harder for me to, I don't want to say defend him, but just, I don't know, just see the improvement that we were supposed to be getting from a sophomore year Tyrese Proctor. I do think he's better this year than last year. Don't get me wrong. And I don't know, maybe he had an injury before the game. You never know what's happening with these guys off the court. And it is always just one game. That's important to remember. One game doesn't tell the story of your entire season most of the time until you get to March. But just putting up no points in a game like this, in a big ACC game at home too. It's not even like you're on the road. Like you didn't have away fans chirping in your ear the whole game. Just not a good game for Proctor, and not an easy one to defend for big Proctor supporters. Again, still think the kid should play and start and all that. Love him as a player. But gosh, this has been a rough week for him. I mean, coming from Carolina to now, it's been a rough stretch. He did have 10 points, I think, in one game, and then maybe had 9 or 8 in the other two, but just not the numbers we expect from him. I mean, it's just, I don't know if his injury early in the year really just got him out of the flow of the chemistry of this team. You know, we actually started clicking as a team. He went out. We were able to beat Baylor, which I still think is probably our best win of the year still, without him. So I'm not saying this team is better without him, but it's just, but that's really not an excuse. I mean, we've played so much since then. You would think that the chemistry issues would not be there, but it just, I don't know. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if he's not aggressive enough. I don't know if this is what the coaching staff is telling him to play like. But that's just not the production you expect to see from Tyrese Proctor in this type of game. He's typically a guy who gets up for big games, and I think he will in the tournament. You know, we're talking about this guy. Does it surprise any of us if in the second round of the tournament he leads Duke in scoring, you know, gets 25 and makes 50% of his threes and is doing step-back mid-range jumpers like he did against Tennessee last year? And that's when it really matters. So here's to just hoping Proctor can just turn it on as the season gets late in the year. But it's just not the game you expect to see from him at this level. And the last thing I have for the bad that I have time to talk about really is just the bench production. And I don't know if this is necessarily bad, but the rotation's getting interesting. So here's the minutes breakdown for tonight. As you know, the starters, regular starters, Roach, Proctor, McCain, Flip, Mark. McCain played 38 minutes. Mitchell played 38 minutes. Roach played 30 minutes. Flip played 38 minutes. Proctor and Foster both played the same amount of minutes, 26 minutes. After that, Sean Stewart had 2 minutes. Ryan Young had 2 minutes. Jalen Blake had 1 minute. So we essentially played 6 guys for meaningful minutes this game. I mean, Sean Stewart and Ryan Young spot minutes. I think they even played at the same time. So this was there's one guy coming off the bench the entire game. And it's not what I expected for this team, being what I would anticipate it as deep as we were. You know, in the offseason, I think we all expected Sean Stewart to play more. I think Ryan Young has really not played that much in the last few games. It might be the time of year where he's really seeing his minutes get cut down. But gosh, that's just a lot of minutes. I just want to point that out and say, our only bench production was Caleb Foster getting 4 points, and and that was it. Everybody else, McCain finished with 17, Mitchell had 23, Roach had 12, Flip had 21, and then Foster has 4, and there's all your points for the night. It was not a. I guess it was balanced in the perspective that the starters were pretty balanced other than Proctor. But as far as a team perspective, this was not one of those games where we get, 15 points off the bench. And that's something that I do think can hurt Duke later in the year. Especially with foul trouble, which we've talked about a lot with Flip. It's less of a big deal if one of the guards gets in foul trouble because we just have so many. But especially with Flip, who I'll mention this in kind of the positives. Foul trouble hasn't been a problem for him in the past few games. But that's all the bad I have. Just ending with that, not a lot of bench production. And I think I've been saying it for a few episodes now. Like, we're seeing the rotation, the March rotation really come into play. And it is really looking like we're going to play 7 guys in the tournament. I think Sean or Ryan will come up for spot minutes, not a lot of minutes, but primarily we're going to see 6 guys on the court, and it's those 6. It's the starters and Caleb Foster, which I think is what a lot of people would have predicted to start the year. But that's just something to keep your eye on, and I kind of pegged it as a bad just moving forward. You wish we were a little bit deeper and had developed a little bit more of a bench throughout the season. But moving on to the good, and it starts, as I said, with defending the three-point line against Wake's really good shooters. I think they have like 4 guys that are shooting above 40% and a couple others that are at like 38. But this was, I believe, the lowest scoring first half Wake Forest had all year, which is really an achievement. Now, I know, part of that is, you get lucky, they miss shots, but another part of that is you're playing good defense on them. So to hold them to the shooting percentages, to hold them to what did they shoot for the entire game? 23% the whole game is a massive win, and is exactly what John Shire would want to hear before the game. Like, hey, we're going to hold these guys to under 25% shooting from 3. You hear that, you're pretty much going to win the game against this Wake team. That's a huge part of their offense. As I said earlier, I do think that translated a little bit, weirdly enough, to us shooting poorly. But moving on from that, we've already talked about that enough. I just wrote down McCain. I think it's hard to pick out. I think player of the game for this game was Mark Mitchell, absolutely, and I'll talk about him in a second. But after that, it's kind of tough to decide if Flip and McCain had more of an impact on this thing. McCain was more steady throughout the entire game, but Flip turned it on more at the end and got some really critical buckets for us kind of in consecutive fashion in the last. But just McCain, what more can be said about this kid? He finishes with another double-double, 17 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal. And I'll give myself a little bit of credit here. I'm not the only person who was saying it, so it's not just me. But I kept saying in our kind of preseason reviews of this team, McCain is a heck of a lot more than a three-point shooter. Everybody fell in love with watching him win the high school McDonald's three-point shooting contest, and I kept seeing it. Look, if you watch this kid's high school tape, he's not a guy who's just hovering around the perimeter and shoots threes. He's active. He's active on the glass. He's active in the passing game. He's constantly running around off ball, which is something I don't think he was doing in the first few games at Duke until we kind of figured out how to play him. And he's just a mover, puts in a ton of effort. Defensively, he's always there, even though he gives up a lot of size because of Duke's playing 3 guards. The kid is just a star, man. And we would be so lucky as Duke fans to get this kid back for another year. And I'm still predicting him to come back, and I predicted him to come back at the beginning of the year. I predicted all our freshmen to come back, but and that's not based on any insider info or anything, or even when you look at mock drafts. I think he would be projected to get drafted this year. It's a weaker draft class, but I just think everything he said about his college experience, everything he said about Duke, just reminds you of a guy who just wants to play college. And I think money is not a thing for him. He got the TikTok stuff. He's an NIL star. He's so likable of a human being. He's just infectiously positive, it seems. And I imagine he's such a fun guy to coach and guy to be around in the locker room. But I just see him coming back. I don't know. I think he just reminds you of a kid who loves college basketball and just wants to play college for a while. I think he even had some quotes where he had some quotes where he said, "I want to get better each one of my consecutive years at Duke," implying he could even stay longer than 2 years. Now you never know, but gosh, I get excited thinking about him coming back next year. Just he could stay the same, and I'd be excited. But thinking about him improving at all, golly, and especially imagine Cooper Flagg being able to kick out to open Jared McCain threes. That should get any Duke fan very, very excited, especially talking about all the guys we already have coming in. But I would take McCain over anybody we have committed over next year, maybe other than Cooper, but Cooper he's not a guard. But if it takes another guy transferring out, give me McCain back, because he is such an awesome player. And this is just another star performance from him. And he has gotten up in the big games. I mean, Carolina, he was maybe our best player at times. Just an awesome game from him. I don't know how he's such a good rebounder. At the beginning of the year, he kept putting up these big rebounding numbers, and I had thought it was just kind of luck, the ball's just bouncing his way. But he keeps getting double doubles, and he's not even our biggest guard. Proctor, I think, has a couple inches on him. I could go on about McCain. It's just an incredible season he's having. I think he should win. I think he's got a great shot at winning ACC Freshman of the Year. And it'll be tough because Duke has other stars. But if he was playing on another team, I think he'd be a shoo-in for it. But just a great performance from him tonight. He picked it back up from three. He'd struggled a little bit from three. His last game he went 1 for 8. Today he goes 3 for 7, which is about 43% from three. Perfect from the line. A good rebounding, shooting game for him. But he just, like we said, he affects the game in so many other ways, and it showed. He played 38 minutes tonight, so and I think he's going to keep playing 38 minutes. I don't think we can afford to keep him off the floor. Mark Mitchell had one of his best games as a Blue Devil, for my mind. He tied his career high in points, 23 points, finished 9 for 14, so efficient. He made a three again. He did finish only 50% from the line, which isn't great for him. 8 total rebounds, 2 blocks on the game. Oh man, Mark just plays simple basketball. When he is at his best, it is beautiful to watch because there's no fanciness with Mark. He gets to a spot, he sees an advantage in the paint, he takes an advantage. If he's on a smaller guy, he turns around and just shoots over him on the box, and it goes in. He typically makes free throws really well. He takes advantage of space because they're sagging off him so much from the three-point line. He's really learned throughout this year. He has enough speed and momentum to where if he can get himself going, he's almost impossible to stop. He made a ton of tough shots under the rim today. He looks to get fouled. When he's at his best, it is a thing of beauty to watch because his efficiency is just through the roof. He doesn't take stupid shots most of the time. Everybody takes dumb shot every once in a while, but he shot 64% from the floor today. It's just the efficiency metrics on this kid are just incredible, and I was thinking to myself during tonight's game, he sometimes mentally plays the game how people wish Flip would think about it. I think Mark just knows when he gets a mismatch, he's just taking it in, and he's not thinking about anything else. I think the complaint about Flip has been a little bit maybe too much hanging out on the perimeter trying to make threes, and sometimes he'll pass out of stuff, and he is certainly getting double teamed more. But just that mindset of just I've got a smaller guy on me. He's not as good as me. I'm going to post him up and take him to the basket, and that's going to be that. I'm not thinking about doing anything else, and I'm either going to get a foul or this is going in. Mark just had one of those games tonight. I felt like he was in a bulk of his points, which is really why I think he's the player of the game and not just his point totals. A bulk of his scores came when Duke really needed it. When this was a game, surprisingly, Wake never took the lead, even though it felt like they could have a couple times. They tied it a few times, but not in the second half, and wasn't able to take a lead. I think 3 points was the closest it got. But it was like, yeah, when Wake pulled it to 3, I think they did it at least once. Mark was the guy, 2 consecutive baskets out of a timeout. All of his points really came in spurts when we really needed it. He had one dunk at the end that was a freebie, but none of his other points were like, oh, the game's over, he's just stat padding, or that's going to look good on the scorecard. All these points came in the meat of the game when Duke really needed somebody to step up and get a bucket. Surprisingly today, most of the time I felt like it was Mark Mitchell. Awesome game from him. Jermey Roach, I think Roach had a good game. He didn't fill up the stat line like he normally did. He only shot the ball 8 times, but he went 5 for 8 and 2 for 4 from 3, and hit probably the most electric shot of the game, which I want to talk about later. I'm going to save that one for later. But Roach was just he was a steady captain tonight. He did what he needed to. I thought he played decent, pretty good defense out there. Finished with 5 assists also. Great for him. That's a 12-point, 5 assists, 2-rebound game for him. He had some turnovers, finished with 3 turnovers, had some lazy passes, especially for him. But he'll clean that up. I'm not worried about Jermey at all. And biggest thing with Jermey to talk about is, like, what a 3-point sniper he has just turned into on the year. I think he's shooting 45% from 3. Yeah, his 3-point percentage is 44%. That's leading the team. And he shot 79. It's not like he doesn't shoot a lot of them. That's just been, has it been the biggest surprise of the year? The biggest maybe positive surprise of the year is how awesome he shot the 3. And again, I talked about it on my preseason breakdown before too, that I thought Roach was going to shoot by far the best 3-point percentage of his career, and he is doing that. And I think a big part of it is that there are so many other shooters on this team. There are more shooters on this team than in any of the other Duke teams, that he's left open a lot more, and he's converting on this. But that has just become a huge weapon for this Duke team, how well he is shooting from 3. And he displayed that tonight, and in other ways. He's obviously got the speed and the acceleration to get to the basket, make free throws, make tough layups. He's done that his whole career. But a solid performance from Roach. And then moving on to Kyle Filipowski. Flip had a better bounce back game from his last couple games. I think his game is tainted a little by his 3-point shooting tonight. He finished 8 for 14, but only 1 for 6 from 3. So, I mean, you can see there that his efficiency, he still shot 57% today, but that goes a lot higher if he's either not shooting or making more of his threes. I do think he probably at times fell in love a little too much with the 3, and I'm not even talking about the amount of threes he's taking. I'm talking about where he is on the floor on offense. Think he does hover around the 3-point line a little too much. But I wrote this in my notes too. I mean, look, he went 1 for 6 from 3 and had 21 points. If he hits 2 more of those threes, like let's say he goes 3 for 6 or even 2 for 6, like if he hits 2 more of these threes, we're talking about a 27-point performance, and none of us are saying, oh, he's hanging out by the perimeter too much, because he would have just had 27 points and shot 50% from 3, just hitting 2 more. And a lot of these threes he were taking were wide open. So I don't have a problem with him taking a lot of threes. My more problem is in the offensive scheme and game plan. I just think he's so good in the post. Sometimes it feels like he's hovering around there too much, looking for the 3. So if there's anything to improve on for him, or at least schematically, it's, take the threes when they're there. He's a decent, I think he's shooting 35% on the season, and that's, I think, after tonight, going 1 for 6. But he's proved he's a better 3-point shooter than he was last year, and he can make those. And if he makes those, it is almost impossible to beat Duke. Like if Flip is able to hit 40% from three in a game and he shoots, several like it's just so hard to beat Duke because you're going to be so worried about defending the 3-point line that we're just going to dominate you inside. So I'm fine with him taking 6 threes but just make sure we're not using him just on the perimeter, and that we're, especially tonight in a game where Wake's big men were in foul trouble the whole game, felt like we could have posted him up more. And when he got a lot of those last-minute critical points when Wake was kind of still battling, we gave it to him in the low post, and he was able to score nearly every time, especially on Wake's third string big man. But that's it for Flip. He finished with 21 and 10, still shooting 57%. It's hard for me to be mad at that. Good bounce back game from Flip, getting over 20. And then kind of last thing, maybe I'll end the episode with this. The moment of this game was John Shire getting upset with the officials, specifically Teddy Valentine, or TV Teddy as the Twitter world likes to call him. Kind of a mean nickname. But yeah, so it was, I can't remember exactly the call. It was either a call that was an out of bounds call that was obviously out on Wake and they still gave him the ball, or it was a non-foul. I can't remember which it was because there were so many. Officiating was all over the place tonight, and Duke got some Duke benefited from it a little. I think Wake benefited from it considerably more. I believe Wake, if I can pull up the stats, I believe Wake ended up shooting more free throws than Duke did. Well, no, we finished 25-13 advantage. Now that kind of makes sense because of the way Wake plays. They're not a team that goes inside a bunch and tries to dominate you on the inside. They're a shooting team. But Wake got the benefit of a lot of calls tonight. Duke benefited from it a little too, but the officiating was frankly just bad in this game. But there was a play where Wake benefited from a call that even the announcers on TV were talking about how bad it was. And the ball actually rolled to Shire from the play. And Shire kind of underhand slowly just chucked it back to the officials and was just really screaming at him, as much as John does. It's kind of just loud talking. But you could see it in his face how upset he was at these officials. And the crowd just feasted on that. They just latched on to that and exploded. Even before play was going on, the crowd, it felt like Shire was about to get a tech, and I kind of wanted it. Even though it was a close game, I kind of wanted it because of how bad the officiating was going. But the crowd just feasted off of that. And then next Duke offensive possession, Roach hits the 3, and from that moment on, I was not worried Duke was going to lose this thing. I was like, that is just a crazy turn of events, and the energy in the room. I saw a few tweets from people that were there, but it sounded like when Roach hit that 3 after a horrible ref call and Shire getting pissed at the refs, kind of amping the crowd up, saying like, let's go, we got to overcome some stuff here tonight. And then Roach hits a 3 right after. I can only imagine how loud it got in that building. But that's the moment of the game for me, is Shire really showing some emotion, and the crazies latching onto that and tearing the roof off of Cameron when Roach hit that 3-point shot. And from that point on, I felt like Duke had this thing in a bag. But yeah, that's kind of all my thoughts for this game. Like I said at the beginning, top of the episode, Duke has a ton of important games coming up, and it's important that we put our best foot forward in each and every one of these games, not only for the win, but for the net rankings and all the weirdness that comes with that, efficiency numbers. It's important for Duke to have a good, strong enough closing to the season. Sometimes having a lot of momentum going into the tournament, I think, is somewhat overrated when you look at how rare it is for you to win your conference tournament versus the NCAA tournament. But as far as the regular season goes, you want to have a strong end to that, especially when you're playing the high-quality ACC opponents that Duke is rounding out the year. But it's been great. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate each and every one of you tuning in to Duke Blue Central. If you want to help out the podcast, you can leave a rating wherever you're listening to, or follow me over on Twitter at Duke Blue Central. It's been awesome. Have a good night, Duke fans. Go Blue Devils.